Yeah, no bad. I don't know about that one. I'm gonna go with.
When we get to your portion, I'll just switch and you can control from here. Okay, cool.
Sorry.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I'm looking for the password. There it is.
Oh, yeah. Here you go. I'll just do it.
There you go.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Hey, good morning to everybody. It's good to see you. Got a great crowd, good turnout, and we do have a quorum. With that, I'm going to call our Transportation Policy Board to order. I'd like to welcome anybody that's streaming on the internet, and if you're on the line or whatever, how do you handle that, Michael? You just look at your phone and sit there on there? I told him I was going to get off I'm going to get off the rails today, because I think we're fixing to have a nomination meeting in a couple of months. All right. Our first order of business today is to vote for the minutes of the September meeting. Is there a motion? Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. The minutes are filed. Thank you. Okay, at this time we'll go to public comments. Is anyone from the public that would like to address this board? Seeing or hearing none, we'll move on from there and we'll go to our action items. Okay, Resolution 2301, a Regional Transportation Plan. I'd like to introduce Anna, our Principal Planner.
Thank you, Mayor Vogel. This item is related to an amendment to the Regional Transportation Plan. It's for the addition of a new project that is not currently in the RTP. Thank you. So this project is not currently in the RTP, but has identified funding associated with it, so we are able to add it to the RTP. This is for the Cleveland Street Extension project that involves 2 new multimodal corridors linking East Nashville neighborhoods with the economic opportunities under development in the River North area. You're going to see an associated TIP amendment related to this RTP amendment, also amending this project into the TIP. It is funded with state and local funding, so there's no federal funding involved at this point in time with this project. It is fiscally constrained since the funding has been identified, so I think we need to hold a public hearing related to this.
Okay. Any questions for Anna? Okay, I'll open this.
If you want to go ahead and turn to the TIP amendment summary page that is in your meeting packet. It's the second proposed amendment listed there. There is funding identified in state and local funds for preliminary engineering all the way through construction that you can view in the table there.
Good, Mayor Moore? I'm looking at it. You looking? While Mayor Moore's looking, does anyone have a question?
It is also...
I'm curious about all the state funds. Are those funds that typically have been allocated to other projects? Is there some special designation for those funds? Help us understand, because that's looks like a pretty good deal.
Yes, sir. So my understanding, and anyone that is present from TDOT is happy to weigh in on this, but I believe there was a transfer of funding from state general funds for this project, transferred over to TDOT to add to the state funding portion.
Is that part of our normal process that we've gone through in the past?
I'm going to defer that question to TDOT if there's somebody that can speak to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So this project was initially identified to use. Initially, this project was identified to use local interstate connector funds. However, this is a direct result of the Oracle development. So being that it's such a large investment, the state did transfer funds from the general fund to help cover some of these expenses. Lisa, do you have anything you would like to add to that?
The only thing I add is that I do understand that if once we get into the project and the costs start overrunning, there could be a possibility of us adding NHTP funds to this project.
Anyone else? Thank you, John.
The interstate connector funds out now?
Yeah, there's no LIC funds on this project currently.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else? Mayor Moore, good questions. Yeah. Okay, anybody else got a question for Anna? All right, I'll open this up.
The Vice Mayor has a question.
Okay.
I'm happy to make a motion to approve. I'm happy to make a motion to approve if that's what you need, but I don't want to cut off anybody from asking any questions. I'm not even sure if that's if I'm supposed to do that. But
I was told you the guru at this.
I am. So I would move every project that Nashville wants right now.
Okay. Somebody take his mic away.
What a generous offer, Jim. Yeah, what a great idea. I guess I'm just trying to understand. I understand that Oracle's moving there. I understand that this is a nice economic development project for the city of Nashville. I'm trying to understand how this improves transportation in our region, how that helps the region looking at this particular plan. I mean, does it get traffic off the interstate? Or is this strictly an economic development project that Nashville's getting a good deal on?
Okay. Ma'am, will you state your name? I cannot see those.
No problem.
I'm
Good morning, everybody. Diana Alacone with this Metro Nashville, Davidson County. With the extension of Cleveland, it is going to allow for us to have the connection. And Steve, you can jump in and help me with this conversation, if you wouldn't mind. It will allow us to have a connection from Dickerson on down from a transit perspective. So East Bank, which we actually brought before y'all a few months back and kind of went over overview of what we're planning on East Bank, is being designed for a BRT. By raising Cleveland and allowing for that extension, it's allowing for us to now connect and continue a BRT up to Dickerson Pike. So it's allowing us to then think more comprehensively about that north-south connection of Dickerson down to the East Bank, through East Bank, and then over the Cumberland and connecting to the south side to Murfreesboro and then down, so that we can look at a more long-term regional approach. So we do feel it has a regional opportunity.
I'll also add that this won't be the only project that's going to be in receipt of general fund transfer dollars. As you remember, the governor's budget set aside $600 million of additional funding for TDOT. That was earmarked for specific projects, and as we go through the next couple of months, we're likely to be incorporating those projects into the plan and transportation improvement program as well. You'll recall conversations that we had as a board at the urging of former Senator County Mayor Anthony Holt about State Route 386. So that's one of those projects that's going to be in line for some additional general fund dollars to transportation for TDOT as well.
Steve Bland?
I would defer to Mayor Moore if he's one of my bosses. Just to amplify some of the remarks that Diana made, the last meeting when Metro Planning gave the presentation on the East Bank study, we did talk some about the regional transit connectivity. Because the corridor, including the Cleveland Street extensions, being designed up front and the right-of-way preserved for dedicated lane bus rapid transit, really the goal of the RTA, once that's all built out, would be to take a number of our regional routes, particularly from the north, northwest, northeast, so Sumner County, Robertson County, Montgomery County, in through that facility. So the Dickerson Pike connection will be there, and we have a high level of local transit service there, so that will get built up. But from a regional perspective, it kind of gives us that, one of our huge barriers right now is just general traffic congestion through the downtown core. So it gives us the options that Diana was alluding to for connecting the regional network in a much more streamlined manner.
Thanks, Steve. Anyone else?
I guess I'm looking at, I'm looking at this selfishly. The only corridor I'm aware of that has an equal in and out every day is the southern corridor. And where's my $36 million?
That's a good point. I can't answer that. Anybody who can answer that? Yeah. Mayor Reed.
How this and the overruns are going to affect the rest of us and the rest of our projects.
I think specifically, as Lisa mentioned, on this project with the NHPP coming in to cover any cost overruns, which would be part of TDOT's grouping, NHPP grouping, There's a significant share of funding in the NHPP. It wouldn't come out of the MPO sub-allocated portion of funds. But I think, just in general, as projects, we are seeing projects come in over budget, and generally, as those projects come in over budget, they are going to need additional resources to move to construction, and the general trend is that they delay other projects, just given that the money is finite for the state and the region. The governor's allocation of the additional $600 million is obviously a boost on top of what we traditionally get, but unless those opportunities come forward, we're dealing with a typical same pot of money each year.
And I don't want to give the impression in any way that I don't think this is an important
project or a project that shouldn't be done, but I also don't want all of the other communities that are sitting around this table to be forgotten or our projects not to become as important. So, again, I don't want y'all to think in any way that we don't think your project is important, but I just want us to think about that as we're moving forward.
Mr. Chair, if I may sort of translate a little bit about what we're hearing, which is something that would encourage TDOT, as we looked at 2023, you're going to be asking us for our regional priorities, just to have more thorough conversations about regional priorities before we get requests to add stuff to the TIP. I think that would alleviate some of the concerns that we hear around the table, because it's not about the merit of a specific project. It's just that this body exists to help prioritize federal funds for regional priorities, not to just incorporate those decisions into the TIP upon request. So I think a little bit more heads-up conversation around where the state is headed with the use of federal funds before we get to these action items would be beneficial.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. Good point. I know the governor, just talking from the side, he's made a lot of promises about roads now, and I hope they're not all earmarked already. I hope a lot of it comes in front of this group. Mayor Callis.
We talked about this a few meetings ago about the interstate money going possibly to this project, and I assume that due to the governor's $600 million on his budget, that they don't need to go through that route. They can get the appropriation for this project. I was just curious, do we know what the parameters are for the governor's $600 million on how those projects can be looked at and which projects come before them? Do we know the parameters for that $600 million? Just curious.
No, I'm not sure. I don't have anything to comment on that this time from TDOT's perspective. But we'll be sure to get more information out as we learn more information as well. It's all pretty fast moving right now since the election.
Any other comments? That's a good question, because when I look at some of this stuff, I was wondering how the East Bank project is maybe relating to how they're going to handle the traffic and everything. That's a good question, Mayor Anderson. I can't answer that. Wow. Having a good discussion. Anybody else?
So there's no federal funding involved in this action. I'm Sean Santaya from the Federal Highway Administration, but just to ask a sort of clarifying question of TDOT, you mentioned possibility of future NHPP funding. Are these facilities on the National Highway System? Would they be eligible? Or?
They're within the interstate right-of-way.
Okay. All right. Work with our office on that decision.
If I may, Mr. Chair, to address the question concerning about is this going to help with the trips on the highway system, The studies that we have done tied to the East Bank does reflect a lot of local trips currently happen on the interstate, and as we look at building out and making the connection through the Cleveland extension to Dickerson, down the East Bank into Murfreesboro, we are and believe that we will remove trips off of the interstate and onto that local roads, and those are current local trips that are moved to the interstate just to be able to move within Nashville. So we have done some analysis that does look at improving the traffic flow on the interstate system and moving it to the local roads, and those are local trips that currently use the interstate. So I just wanted to provide that as some point of information.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Mayor Moore.
Could you maybe mention what the timeline is for construction of this particular project?
TDOT is managing the project, so I don't know if somebody here from TDOT can speak to.
That's 2024.
Yeah,
I mean, well, that's why I'm asking, because I'd love for TDOT projects to happen this quick in my neighborhood.
So there's a minor pause on the design aspect of the project right now with Oracle and TDOT about some pedestrian facilities and some other aspects. So best guess is that they have actually pushed out construction to like 2026. So
it's pretty sweet still.
They're moving this one fast. But yeah, they're talking with Diane's office and Oracle people and trying to get those issues resolved so they can get back to charging forward.
What'd you say, Mayor Moore?
I said it's still pretty sweet. 2026.
I just wanted to get that on record. Okay. Anybody else? If not, I'm going to close and go to a public hearing. Does anybody in the public like to make a comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. I failed to say at the start that if you vote against this, to identify yourself for the record, please, or any action items we have today. Okay, I need a motion.
I move we defer it so that we can have a full report from TDOT.
Second. I got a motion to defer and a second.
We'll meet again in January.
Yeah.
Or next
January. Thanks for putting the words in my mouth.
Any discussion on that? Chair recognizes the Vice Mayor.
I don't think so, because we're still in those discussions before. I just want to make sure we're not creating an issue. No, but I haven't even expressed the fact that it's all for
Okay. The question is there any issues with deferring it for them, with the timetable you're working with? And I understand, is it Lisa?
Yes.
Lisa says no problem.
I don't believe there is, because they're having some ongoing discussions.
Probably go. You want to. I'm pointing to Vice Mayor.
Oh, I'm looking back here.
Okay.
So it sounds like we always want to be helping Mr. The information, obviously, project. But it sounds like we can wait. It's okay to defer, so that's fine.
Well, okay. Thank you. I think it's very important if you want. Probably, I'm speaking out of turn. If this pass, I think they're going to want to be more information to get a yes vote, and I don't see anything wrong with that. And I'm glad that you're fine with it too. Okay, any more discussion on this? Gentleman from White House.
Yeah, I mean, if you needed to get going, could you move your local funds up a little bit faster into your preliminary engineering and environmental? It looks like you're starting out with state funding, but could you go with your local if you needed to keep going, get the project going, get state a little bit later if you have to? Okay, thank you.
Thing. Make sure that whatever questions are out there, whatever anybody wants, that we make sure we get them in so we can get all the information together for the next meeting, get it out.
Thank you. I think that's a good point. Good point. The questions they need to go through, Michael? Sean? Anna?
I'll just add that there is a list available on the web of this general fund transfer that outlines the 3 economic development projects, 7 state highway partnership program projects, and 12 rural interchange improvement program projects that were a part of this general fund transfer. So we'll make sure to send that information out as well in our usual email recap of the meeting.
Okay. Okay, we've got a motion on the table, the floor to defer, and got a second. Is there no more discussion? If you're in favor of that motion, vote aye. Anyone opposed? So move. If you will, get your questions to Anna so she can get it to those that need to know as quick as we can. Okay, we'll move to the next action item. Wow. Resolution 2302, amending the TIP program. I'm going to turn it back to Anna again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We originally had 4 amendments proposed here for your review today. We will remove the Cleveland Street extension amendment from consideration due to the deferral of the RTP amendment. So we'll get started with a request from Metro Nashville for the Jefferson Street Cap and Connector project. Their request is to add the project to the TIP with $3 million federal HIP funds that they received from FHWA to begin community engagement related and technical study related activities on this proposed project. Following that, we have a request from TDOT for the Donaldson Pike relocation project. Their request is to add NHPP funds, so that's federal funding to the project for construction. And then finally, we have another request from TDOT for the widening of Vietnam Veterans Boulevard and Long Hollow Pike and Offutt Drive Connector project. This was also a project that was discussed in a previous meeting. The request is to add the project to the TIP with both state LIC funds, that's local interstate connector funds, local funds, and NHPP funds for project activities all the way from preliminary engineering to construction. If anybody has any questions about any of these 3 proposed amendments, I'm happy to take those. I will also just clarify that we all know we're moving toward the hopeful approval of our new and updated transportation improvement program, most likely in the January timeframe. So these amendments are for the current TIP, the one we've been operating under for the past 3.5-ish years, and these changes will be incorporated into the new TIP once that's approved.
Okay, any questions for Anna? Okay, I'm going to try to repeat. If there's no questions, I'm open up to the public right quick. I got a question right down.
So specific to the Jefferson Street Cap and Connector, this project was funded through the last Appropriations Act as an earmarked project. We don't have much information on the scope of what was intended with that earmark, but just to let you all know, the fact that what's being proposed here does pretty explicitly say a cap might not be the result of the planning study that's going to be carried out with this funding. We just might have some additional questions for Metro Nashville before we would be able to approve it from the federal highway perspective. Not to preclude an action of this board, but just this might be something that we might need a little bit more information on before we can approve it.
Thank you for that, Sean. I believe we posed a similar question to Metro.
everybody good? No more questions? If there's no more questions for Anna, I'll open this up to the public for public comment. Anyone here like to speak on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to this body. I'm going to need a motion to approve, I think, what the Jefferson Street connector, the Dawson Pike, and the widening of Vietnam's veterans. We're leaving out Cleveland Street extension because it got deferred. Am I right, Anna?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, got a motion. Vice Mayor, need a second? Second, somewhere down through there. Okay. I can't see that far, you know. Anyway, I got a second. There's no discussion. All in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? So moved.
Question for Anna. How much do we have fund balance in our TIP for the last, you used the term 3 to 4 years?
Balance of unobligated funds. Do you mind if I look that up and get back to you in just a couple minutes? Thank you.
And I'm making a distinction too between unobligated, so programming committed to a project but not obligated in the federal system, a distinction between that and unprogrammed funds, so funds that would be available to go to additional projects or funds that would be available to go to existing projects that need more money. So we'll get you both of those numbers.
Yeah. I would say probably, without being able to give you an exact number, maybe around 150 to 160 million that's currently unobligated, and maybe around 2 million in suballocated STBG funds that are not committed to a project.
You good, Mayor Anderson?
And that takes us back about 4 years.
Maybe a little more than that, yes, sir.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Hearing none, we'll move to our next action item, Resolution 2303, adopting the 23-26 TIP program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Next item that we have regarding the Transportation Improvement Program is for our new TIP, which will carry us into the next 4 federal fiscal years. As Anna mentioned, there is this overlap of 2023 as we get the document approved, and that will be this document will hopefully become our live document that we're working off of come January. But we've been in the process of developing this TIP for over the past year. I would say that we have focused a lot of time and effort into reviewing and updating information on a lot of our existing commitments, so projects that were programmed in the existing TIP, and those projects that have not been obligated but that are carrying forward into the next 4 years. And so getting accurate cost estimates and scheduling dates for those so that we can set ourselves up for success moving forward into the next 4 fiscal years. To do that, we not only had county workshops with local government staff to review these projects, but we also developed a TIP project tracking tool that facilitated that discussion and review and updating of projects, which we found pretty successful. In kind of the spring to early summer is when we looked at the funding outlook, so the amount of revenue that would be available over the next 4 years, and due to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, there was additional funding available for projects, and so we prioritized those investment priorities, a lot of existing commitments, as I mentioned, some additional funding requests, as well as some setting aside of funding in reserve for the inflationary pressures that we're facing. And so now as we move forward into the fall, we have the draft document compiled, sent around to the state for their review, and we've also released it for public review and comment. Ideally, we would like to have the state and federal review process finished prior to adopting the document. That hasn't always happened in the past, and it isn't complete this time. We have addressed the state comments that they have reviewed and provided, and sent those back to TDOT. Federal FHWA and FTA are currently reviewing the draft document, and we will address any comments that they have as well. But we're looking for your adoption today as we move into this next TIP cycle. So within the draft document, we have not only background information and how this development process was conducted, but also the financial plan that contains that available revenue that will be available over the next 4 years by funding source, and then also the projects that are programmed, and so the programmed amount or what we plan to expend over the next 4 years to ensure that we are fiscally constrained and not programming more money than we have available. And then also contained within that document is project pages. So for each of the projects that funding is programmed, you'll have a map and the basic project details on each of those projects, as well as the funding breakdown. And you can access that at the link. And then we also have our TIP application, which we've updated for the 23 to 26 TIP, and that's available, which is the database that you hopefully have access to and have explored. This is a little bit easier to navigate if you want to search individual projects and review those details. You can search either by using the map or just search within the database tab. And then just kind of a breakdown of the, about $1.6 billion in funding is programmed within this TIP. And in addition to specific projects that have their individual pages, we've got a lot of multimodal upgrades. We've got road widening projects. We've got transit investments from the capital side to the operating side as well, some ITS and intersection projects, as well as some interchange and ramp improvements. And then that's a majority, about $1.2 billion. And then we also have a number of set-aside programs, and a lot of these programs, money has been set aside for specific purposes, and they will either have future calls for projects to prioritize these funds, or, for instance, on the state grouping side, you have a number of TDOT buckets that are provide a little bit of flexibility in terms of targeting predominantly maintenance and modernization projects within these different buckets. So, for instance, STBG and NHPP goes to a lot of resurfacing and bridge rehabilitation work across the federal highway system. And then similarly, on the HSIP, focused on safety improvements at high crash locations, either at railroad crossings or interstate ramps across the region. And then we have programs like CMAQ, TAP, and the Multimodal Access Grant, which are set aside funds through calls for projects. We also have some regional groupings, programs that we've carved out with our suballocated funds that go towards active transportation and also our transit and technology. And then one new program that we've carved out this time is for planning purposes, to carve out some of the STBG funds for planning on specific projects within the region. And then lastly, just the local groupings. There are certain communities that receive a portion of these local STBG dollars for these 3R buckets for resurfacing and general maintenance related work on facilities within their jurisdiction. Some of the key takeaways from this TIP development cycle, it's important to note that we have focused a lot on existing commitments, and so the investments should look familiar, as we have a lot of projects that are carrying forward from our existing TIP into this new document. One thing is we have set aside a significant portion of funding for the reserve funds to handle these inflationary pressures, and so the hope is that as projects move forward to construction and bids may come in higher than expected, that there is these reserve funds available, and I should say readily available, so that project proponents can tap into that to ensure that their project continues to move forward and have the funding available to match the bids that come in. And then we've also set aside the program funds, as I've mentioned, for the active transportation program, transit and technology. And then one other thing that I think is important to mention is we've talked a little bit about some of these larger statewide priorities, is that the list of priorities still need approximately $1.1 billion beyond the life of this TIP, and so there's a lot of projects, particularly Improve Act projects, that the early stages of project development early phases of work are programmed within the TIP, but there's going to be significant funding for right-of-way needs and construction needs that are not currently identified, but would be needed to complete these projects beyond the life of this TIP. And then lastly, I kind of touched on this. We have been out for public review and comment today. We were holding our public hearing and looking for your adoption. And as I mentioned, still working to address some remaining state comments, and then any comments that come in after Federal Highways review is complete. If those are significant, we can bring those back to you as part of a amendment of this document to make sure that we capture those. So I think that's all that I have regarding the TIP development.
Any questions for Sean? Yes, sir.
Sorry I didn't introduce myself earlier. I'm Stacy Morrison from TDOT Long Range Planning, the planning manager. Sean addressed this during his comments, but we did want to note that without us going through that full review process with ourselves and Federal Highway, there is a slight risk there that it could get sent back for readoption. So we wanted to point that out, and Sean very well covered that during his comments as well. And Sean, you want to add to that?
No, yeah, just to reinforce that. So FHWA and FTA, we do have the draft document that you guys have seen before you. We've not yet completed a review of that. So there is potential for if we do uncover anything that would put us in a position to not be able to approve it, it might have to come back before this board. As unlikely as that might be, it is a risk. This along with all the other MPO TIP documents will have to come before our office for approval before it can move forward.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Gerald?
How long do you need for the review, and should we, if we're going to debate whether or not we're going to move this forward or not? Mm-hmm.
Even an action taken today, if there was a need to come back before the board in January, that it wouldn't delay the overall approval of the STIP document for the entire state or anything.
All right, thank you. That's very important.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Gerald. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll invite the public for public comment on this issue. Is anyone here to speak on that? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. there's no more discussion, I need a motion. Got a motion by Gerald Harmon. Got a second. If you're for this resolution, vote aye. If you're against it, vote no. Aye. There we go. Any nays? I declare that action item does pass. Thank you, Sean. Okay, moving to item D, Resolution 2304, adopting the consultant selection policy. I'll turn it back over to Sean again.
Thank you, Jared. This is the last action item we have for you today. This relates to, we're working through the TDOT process with local programs for funding that we set aside through the COVID relief funds. The CRISA funds set aside about $1.5 million for a big data purchase for software acquisition. And as part of that process of going through TDOT local programs, project sponsors are required to, if they're using state or federal funds, are required to adopt TDOT's consultant selection policy. And so we, as GNRC being the project proponent, we are requesting the board's adoption of this policy to fulfill that requirement through the project initiation process. And I think that it will cover us for any future projects that we take through TDOT local programs. I'm getting head nods, and so I don't think we need to get recertified after 3 years. But that's kind of the immediate need, and then obviously it would satisfy the requirements for future projects. And I think some of the local governments who have been project proponents are probably familiar with having to go through this process as well. So we are seeking your adoption of this resolution to approve the consultant selection policy.
Okay, any questions for Sean? Mayor Rogers Anderson.
Sean, on page 1, get just clarification for me. On page 1 of your 20-page document, it's got up at the top right. Top right-hand corner, it says March 9th, 2018. What is that telling me? That's what you're currently using?
I think that's the date that TDOT last updated these guidelines or the policy.
I can speak more on that. Taylor Lee, the Local Programs Office. That's just the revision date of the document at the top right. So the last revision we had was March 9, 2018 to these guidelines, the consultant selection policy.
So what we're adding is this, the only change in this then is adding the consulting selection process?
That's correct, and it only applies to the GNRC itself if it's the project sponsor. So it doesn't apply to, obviously, if it's a project sponsor is going through local programs to do a project, they're required to do their own local board, but this policy would just be for the GNRC using state or local funds, sub-allocated them through the local programs office.
And I think my final question, you may have answered it. So state aid highway money.
Yeah, if they were, I don't think that'd be into a funding type that the GNRC would use, but if your agency were to use state aid funds, they would need to adopt this as well.
Well, I just don't want to hamper the counties, and particularly our rural counties, with all this new legislation that it's going to require for a consultant. It's bad enough to get it currently.
No, I understand, but it's, Lisa, you're more in the state aid. Do you have anything you want to add?
So the county uses state aid resurfacing funds for the bridge grant program. They will not be following this. They'll be using their same process that they've been using however many years the program has been in. So this is an exception to the rule.
Yeah, well, and I'll just add the distinction that since GNRC is using non-planning dollars to implement projects as a result of some of the recent TIP amendments, think about the CRISA funds that we approved for data acquisition. That is SDBG funds, or it was CRISA money, but it was federal funds, not for typically planning. And so for us to be eligible, just like you are eligible to use federal funds for projects that are implementing improvements or some system for the transportation network, we as an agency need to adopt this policy as well. So each of you around the table already have your policies in place. This is GNRC as an organization taking that step.
Anyone else? Seeing none, this doesn't take a public invite, so I'll entertain a motion to approve. Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? That resolution for adopting consultant selection policy passes. Okay, we'll move down to our informational items. Presentation of local bridge funding opportunities. Welcome Lisa Dunn from TDOT.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, so we're going to talk about off-system bridges. These are bridges that are basically not on the national highway system or a state route. They are classified as rural minor collectors or local roads. So these will be the only bridges that we talk about, but I'll have some comments on the other functional classifications as well. So this is the classification of the rural system. It's urban and rural. We have all the different artilleries and stuff that go through those processes. We are specifically talking about today, if we can get this to work correctly, the local roads that are urban. Well, the rural minor collectors, and then the rural local roads as well. So those three that are circled in red are the off-system bridges that we're talking about. Any of the others that are not circled are considered on-system bridges, and those would be funding that you would get the federal funds either through the MPO, or if you are one of those fortunate communities that gets a small city STBG balance from TDOT, you could use those funds on those projects as well. This is just to give you an idea of how many bridges, off-system bridges there are by county within the MPO area. There's 2,726 off-system bridges in the MPO area. Only 32 are in the Improve Act. So there's still a lot of bridges out there that will have to be taken care of if the need is found. So what constitutes a bridge? Well, according to Federal Highway Administration and Congress, it's anything 20 feet or greater in length. But you can also have culverts. The bridge can be single span, it can be a multi-span, it can be multiple pipes, or it could be a low water crossing. But in order to use the federal funds, it has to be 20 feet or greater in length. State bridge grant funds, slightly different, okay? We do have 5 dedicated funding sources for off-system bridges. We have the 1990 Bridge Grant Program Act. We have the High Priority Bridge Replacement Program Act. We have the Improving Manufacturing Public Roads and Opportunities for a Vibrant Economy, also known as the Improve Act. We have a federal bridge program, which you all may have referred to it as the BRZ or the BRR program in the past. And then we have a new federal program that's called the Bridge Formula Program. In the 1990 Bridge Grant Program, we get about $9.5 million a year. 50% of that 9.5 is equally distributed between all 95 counties, so everybody gets $50,200 off the bat. And then the remaining 50% is based off of need. Now you're going to say, where's that need? Well, if you look down under the requirements, it says you got to be on a priority list 1 or list 2. List 1 is that need. List 1 is generated based off of a weight limit of 9 tons or less. So if it's on list 1, there's an algorithm that we put together, and based off of the length of the bridge, you get more funding in your county balance for the bridges. In this bridge grant program, they still have to be between 20 to 100 feet in length, or we can go up to 150 feet in length if the ADT is 200 or above. We do require a bridge grant application, not hard. The guys have, I have regional people that help all the counties with this. It's like a 5-minute form that they fill out. Actually, I think the region state aid coordinators actually fill it out for them, and all they do is sign it and send it back. There is a required 2% match on this, so the funding is a 98.2. You can do repairs, you can do new construction. In the high priority bridge replacement program, this program gets about $18.6 million a year. It can be up to 100% of the approved cost, and it can be used in conjunction with federal funds or other state funds or local funds. The requirement is it does have to be on a locally and public owned road, so if it's going to a private drive, we can't do those. It cannot be on the federal aid system or the state system of highways, so those other categories that were not circled in red earlier, those would be the ones that would not be allowed. These are required to be 20 feet or greater in length, and you have to be in compliance with the National Bridge Inspection Standards. So we do have the Improve Act. We identified 527 off-system bridges in the Improve Act back in 2017. It's a 14-year program. We're currently in year 6. With the way my calculations are going, the high priority bridge funds are actually what's funding the Improve Act bridges right now. And so those high priority bridge replacement funds program, those funds will not be eligible to be used for an off-system bridge until about the year 2040. That's when we should be finished with all of the off-system Improve Act bridges that we have in the system. When a county was approached about the Improve Act, they were told that in order to participate, they had to give up 33% of their bridge grant funds to participate. Not a lot if you think about it, but they also don't get a lot of money, so it does end up hurting their budget a little bit. They have to be in a 3-year plan in order to move forward. Other projects do not have to be in a 3-year plan because we have a grouping for bridges, but because these bridges are specifically identified in state law, we have to identify them in a 3-year plan every year. And I put that together about this time every year and submit it. So this one's already been submitted, so hopefully they'll just pass it and we'll move forward. Otherwise, I don't know how to go backwards because I've never had one not be approved. You can elect for TDOT to do these projects for you. You can do them yourself. I'll tell you, it's probably a little faster if you do it yourself. Just saying. We'll throw that out there. And so new construction and repairs are also eligible for these items too. Under the federal allocations, we have the old, I call it old, but it's the BRZ, BRR program. This is the STBG set aside. We get about $12.7 million annually through 2026. The IIJA expanded the amount that we got for these bridges from 15% to 20%, and we are now covering these at 100% with bridge credits that we have saved up within the department. Historically, this has been an 80-20 program, but now it's going to be at 100%. Again, you have to be an off-system highway bridge based off of the chart that we saw earlier. There is no maximum length or ADT requirements like in the bridge grant program, except for it has to be 20 feet, a minimum in length. The 150 or 100 feet that the bridge grant program has in place is not a requirement for any of the federal funds. And if a county or a city, because some cities do get Improve Act bridges, if they want to move their project quicker, they can opt to use federal funds instead of waiting for state funds to be available. The Bridge Formula Program is a new program that we just got money through the bipartisan infrastructure law. It is 100% federally funded with no bridge credit match from TDOT. So if we say we run out of bridge credits, then it's fine because we still have these for funds. It's $12 million annually, and the same requirements for eligibility has to be that off-system highway bridge. There's no maximum length, just the minimum length is a requirement, And again, the Improve Act bridges are eligible. The two federal funding sources that I just discussed, we have a selection process that we're working through right now. Guidance is a little iffy. We're still trying to fine tune it, but for the major aspect of it, a letter has to come from the local agency requesting to use federal funds, identifying the name of the bridge, if they're going to manage it or if they want TDOT to manage it, and then we'll look at it and see where it falls structurally with weight limit and everything, and we'll get a bridge TIR completed, a condensed one, so we won't do a full-blown one if you're going to do it locally. So it won't take 9 months to a year to do the TIR. It will only take about 4. We will only pay for the bridge and the minimum approaches. You can still elect for TDOT to do the project for you. You don't have to do it. Again, probably faster if you do it. Just saying. There's also, when you're using these federal funds, you also have to look at the pedestrian and bicycle aspect to make sure that it's not a trafficked area where there's heavy pedestrians or bicycles in the area, to accommodate for those as you go through your design processes as well. The last funding source I have is not a dedicated funding source for off-system bridges, but it is an avenue for off-system bridges. This is the state aid highway system. These funds, they get $21 million annually. 50% is equally distributed to the counties. Then the other 25% is based off of population and area. These funds only go to the counties, and the road superintendents are the ones that usually handle these funds. They use them primarily for resurfacing projects, but they are able to flex half their balance to the bridge grant program if they choose. However, they do not have to. They can still do an off-system bridge under the state aid program without moving the funding. They do have to prepare an annual work program, so every year, I require them to be turned in by October, so they're supposed to put together their annual work program, present it to the board, get approval. Basically, it just says, hey board, these are the roads we're thinking about resurfacing this year, and this is what we're anticipating the cost to be. Board approves it or doesn't approve it, I don't know. All I get is the form signed by them that I sent to the commissioner. This program also requires a 2% match. And your eligible activities, like I said, are resurfacing, striping. You can do fog and scrub seal, the bridge replacement and rehabilitation. You can construct a new road or widen an existing road. Not sure how constructing the new road works, considering the road has to be on the state aid system. And if you're constructing a new road, it's obviously not on the state aid system, but that's one of my questions I have presented to leadership to find the answer out. That is the end of my presentation. Anybody got any questions?
Any questions for Lisa? Eddie Hood?
Lisa, what is the qualification for a BRZ bridge?
What are the qualifications for the BRZ? It's the same as it is for the bridge grant program. It has to be off system. It has to be at least 20 feet in length. Your big thing is you've got to send a letter to TDOT for us to review it. We want to get the projects that are on list 1 completed and off the list before we move to list 2, and then go from there. So we're looking at that weight limit and that sufficiency rating as well.
Does a collector road have something to do with this too, a major collector?
Yeah, I think you're talking about a bridge that I responded to a letter on that sent back that it was.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's according to the classification of the bridge. So back, let's go back. Oops.
Mayor Reed, if you're fixing to leave, you may get nominated for something.
Yeah, so what happened with your bridge, Eddie, is your bridge was listed higher than a rural minor collector, and so it was considered on system.
But
And-
it had a poor rating though.
Right. And we're not saying that it can't be done. We're just saying you can't use the BRZ funds because those are for off-system bridges. So you would have to get your funding either from the MPO, local funds, or if it's a city-owned bridge and they get small city funds from SCDG funds, they would be able to use those as well. But the BRZ and the Bridge Formula Program are specifically for off-system bridges.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you.
no problem.
I've got a question, Lisa. This may be a question for Eddie Hood or a mayor in here that's more educated. If a bridge falls in, not by storm or weather or anything, I know a county that happened to, and it took every bit of their fund balance to put it back. Is there any TDOT or federal money out there for something like that? Because I understand you cannot insure a bridge.
Off the top of my head, I do not know if there's any actual other funding out there. I do know there's some emergency relief funds. I don't know what the parameters are for using any of those funds, other than just, what I know about for the off-system bridges. So, I mean, if something like that were to happen, I'm sure TDOT would look at that and say, if it's an off-system bridge and it's completely collapsed and gone, that we would move that to the top of the list and be able to use federal funds or some other additional state funds to get that replaced.
Okay, I got your number. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I've got a question. My question is, you talked about the priority one list, and to get on the priority one list, you've got to send TDOT a letter.
No. So the priority one list and priority two list, those are generated by TDOT annually in July.
Okay.
So in order to be considered for the federal funding, you need to send a letter to TDOT.
For the BRZ, BRR, okay. So for either one of those programs, though, my question is still, what specifically, in sort of an explicitly described fashion, gets you on the priority one list? And what's the wait list like in terms of project delivery, if you are a bridge on that list, or if you're a bridge waiting to get on that list? I mean, I think we're looking for more information to help the locals navigate the system, understand timelines, so they can make a decision about which program they go after. And as far as the BRZ, BRR prioritization, that's the one that requires a letter. What are your criteria that you use to determine how you're going to prioritize the lists for the program? And then the Improve Act list, what are your criteria that you're using to determine which list you put together for the 3-year work program? Because not knowing their criteria, it's hard for any of us to really understand what we ought to be applying for by program. And a letter to TDOT is a really ambiguous sort of criterion.
Okay. So for the Improve Act, there's nothing for you to submit to TDOT or anything. So what I do every year is I send what bridges are not in a 3-year program. I send them back to my structures division. I say, okay, now re-rate these. Tell me, has anybody gotten, their weight limit's been reduced or sufficiency rating's gotten worse? So they'll re-rate them, and it's not on the school rating system like I'm used to. A is bad, F is good, apparently. So I start at the top with all the A's, and then I just go down until I run out of funding. That's how those are determined. Unless a local agency reaches out to me and says, hey, Lisa, I know you're getting ready to do your 3-year plan, but that bridge over on Long Hollow Pike, well, that's probably a bad idea because Long Hollow Pike's on system, but on Harris Hollow Road is, it's getting ready to fall in. We really need to get that one bumped up. So I can look at that stuff. You guys are out there more in the field looking at these bridges and driving across them than I am. I have a bridge phobia. I don't like going across them. So I try to avoid them at all costs. It's a little hard. So that feedback from you all when you know a bridge is getting into worse shape, I get that list. I send it up to my structures division. I send it in July, August. He usually gets it back to me the 1st of September. So if you guys know that you have an Improve Act bridge that's not in a 3-year plan and you need it done and you don't know where it's going to fall on my list, just send me an email and say, hey, really consider this one in your next 3-year plan because it's something that we really need to get moving. We've got, ADT is, really high or what have you. So it's subjective on the Improve Act one. To get on list 1 and list 2. So
those are generated based off of the inspection reports that are done every 2 years by TDOT. List 1 is the worst bridges that you have. The weight limit is 9 to 0 tons. If it's 3 tons or less, the bridge is supposed to be shut down. So those are the ones we majorly want to get taken care of first. But that's the only criteria getting on list 1 is that weight limit. List 2, we're in the process of regenerating new criteria for list 2 because we found out it was kind of like every bridge, as long as it had a sufficiency rating of 80 or less, we were going to put it on list 2, which is not very good. So we're looking at revamping list 2 to be a 10 to 15 ton weight limit and the sufficiency rating being less than 50. And then what we're internally calling list 3 would be anything that doesn't hit that other criteria. Does that answer all the questions?
Well, I think what we'll want to do is maybe our staff can work with you to create some fact sheets that provide this information in a sort of a real time, easily accessible way, and then we can do some work to help communicate on an annual basis these cycles and the ratings and the priorities. But my second question was about on-system bridges, the bridges that are on major roads that are eligible for federal funds, because that's where the majority of volume is. So I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correct. You don't have any dedicated funding, federal funds or state funds at TDOT for on-system bridges?
So the only funding that they have at TDOT for the on-system bridges is the federal STBG funds that is given to TDOT for on-system bridges. And obviously they use those for the interstates and state routes. If it's like Eddie's got a bridge that's locally owned, but it's on system, he can't use the TDOT federal funds that we get for the bridges. He has to go through the MPO or somebody like that.
TDOT's discretion. It's not the feds are not telling you that.
So, yes,
yeah, I'm sure of it. So, okay, well, I think we want to work with you to help communicate this a little bit more fully. I mean, redirecting superintendents to the MPO for SDBG funds have allocated to the region for a bridge replacement is it's a tenuous thing. I mean, we do a call for projects every 4 years. All of our money is dedicated to other projects. We don't have a set-aside bridge program. So we need to find our space to advocate for the state to use more of its federal funds to fix bridges.
Understand.
And understand the distinction between the discretion that the state is exercising on the use of those funds and our ability to weigh in on that discretion from what you're being required to do under federal law. So I think that's what the board is interested in collaborating on.
Yes. So the discussion on the on-system funding for bridges that's not me. I don't know. I would talk to Will Reed or Preston.
Okay.
Somebody up and higher than me that can talk about those funds.
Chairman, can we ensure that we get that
This presentation?
Yeah, we'll include the slides in the follow-up email and the bridge lists that Lisa mentioned. That'll be included in the email as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so quick question. We had a local road realignment many years ago and has left us with some unused bridges. I'm certain they're not identified as a bridge. So a couple questions. Would you all do multimodal, bridges instead of just vehicular traffic? And then second question is, if you did, how do you get a bridge that's not identified to become identified and for the list?
So two parts to that, I guess. So if you've rerouted the road and the road is no longer being used, you probably need to go through your board and have the road designated as not being owned by the county anymore, so that you don't have to maintain it. And that would take the bridge off the inspection list if it's 20 feet or greater in length. So then we wouldn't be inspecting the bridge or anything. If you wanted to use it for pedestrian facilities, then I would highly recommend you going after a TAP grant or some STBG funds through the MPO when they do a call for projects, because you can convert a vehicular bridge into a pedestrian facility. Just make sure that you're tying logically into some other termini on each end.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Anna. Good job. Appreciate you. Okay, we'll move down to our list of obligations for the TIP 2022. I think it's your time again, Anna.
Oh, okay, here we go. Okay, each year, following the end of the federal fiscal year, at the end of September, we are required to report to you and to publicly post a listing of all of our federal funding obligations for that previous fiscal year. So we're doing that really quick here today. You can find the full listing of obligations as well as an associated report containing some additional information and facts in your meeting packet. Just give you kind of a quick rundown of the trends associated with our obligations over the past 10 years or so. As you can see, this chart is depicting all federal highway obligations from 2010 to 2022. There was a large spike in 2018, so this chart's including both our suballocated funding obligations that the MPO has discretion over, as well as the obligations that TDOT made. Pretty large spike in 2018, followed by a dip in 2020 that I'm sure we can all guess what that was attributed to, most likely, and then kind of some leveling out here over the past couple of years. These are the trends for our transit obligations over that same time period. They actually had kind of an inverse pattern to what we saw with the FHWA obligations. That was related to some of the COVID relief funding that the transit agencies received in 2020 that they were able to immediately obligate. You can see that's kind of leveled back out here this year. And then finally, this chart is just taking a look at our suballocated funding. So this would be our SDBG funding suballocated to the Nashville UZA, as well as that is obligated, or that is allocated to the Murfreesboro UZA. Had a pretty large spike there in 2018. That can mostly be attributed to the construction funding being obligated on the Albert Gallatin Avenue extension project. And as well as that was about $25 million, as well as about $5 million that was obligated to the I-24 at Hickory Hollow Parkway interchange. Here in Metro, 2018, there was just a high number of obligations across the board. And then again, things have kind of leveled back out to close to or at about $10 million a year being obligated from our suballocated funding. This just describes the various columns that you'll see in the list of obligations that's contained in your meeting packet. We just wanted to highlight really quickly a handful of the larger obligations that occurred on our locally managed projects. Just a reminder that funding is obligated by phase as you progress with your project development. Your obligation occurs when you're ready to move on to a particular phase and happens right before you receive your notice to proceed for that phase. So the Donaldson Pike relocation project here in Metro obligated $68 million for construction. The Lebanon ITS Phase 1 project obligated $2 million for construction. And then the Harlansdale Farm multi-use path project down in Franklin obligated $2 million for construction as well. So that was just kind of a highlight of some projects that were obligated that sort of brought those projects along to completion. I guess one more thing is this gives me a good opportunity to circle back around to Mayor Anderson's previous question about where we stand balance-wise now that these obligations have occurred and federal fiscal year 2022 has wrapped up. Our current balance in the Nashville UZA is about $162 million. And there, that's about 7 years worth of allocation. We receive around $21 million a year. We're going to get a small boost now that we're under the new federal transportation bill. And then Murfreesboro is currently sitting at around $14 million balance-wise. That's also about 7 years' worth of allocation. They receive about $2 million a year. So I'm happy to take any questions related to this listing. This is just an informational item.
Mr. Chair, before we get to questions, I do want to, maybe share one of the key takeaways for me. It sort of just reminds us, despite the amount of transportation we need out across the region, we're obligating less than half of the money that we're getting every year from the federal government that's sub-allocated to this region for a variety of reasons that the Project Delivery Task Force that Mayor Reed is chairing is looking into. But despite the need for us to address transportation, we're only using on an annual basis about half the funds that were sub-allocated as a region. That's a great concern to us as staff. I know to TDOT, I know to Sean Santai and Federal Highway Administration. For us to make the case that we need more money for transportation, we've got to be able to exhaust all the funds that we're currently getting. And some of the reason why we're not exhausting all the funds that we're currently getting is it's not enough money to do the projects that we need. But it means maybe we ought to be consolidating some of those funds on maybe a shorter list of projects that can get done so that we can make that case that more funding is needed. But I look forward to the recommendations of the Project Delivery Task Force that will come back before this body. But I do want you to walk away from this report with that takeaway.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Anna.
Oh, I just think it's always worth stating too, despite that 162 million-ish balance that we have in the Nashville UZA, all of those funds are programmed to projects across the region. It doesn't mean that it's just sitting there and languishing. We do only have about $2 million in STBG funds that are not currently programmed to projects. That's going to shift a little when we fall under the new TIP once that's approved next calendar year. I just didn't want there to be any confusion about that.
Any more questions for Anna? If not, we'll move to our regular reports. Introduce Sean Santai with our federal report.
Thank you, Mayor Vogel. Sean Santai with the Federal Highway Administration, Tennessee Division out of Nashville here. Just a couple of items I wanted to note. So tomorrow actually marks the 1-year anniversary of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. You'll be seeing probably publicity and things coming from USDOT trying to highlight all the various accomplishments and achievements of the program since it's been passed. And of course, we've had a handful of discretionary grants that have been awarded to Tennessee, and we're looking forward to hopefully seeing more unique and innovative projects coming to Tennessee as a result of that program. I did want to note a currently open discretionary sort of a grant opportunity, but more of a technical assistance opportunity that's referred to as our Thriving Communities program. This is an opportunity for 2 years of intensive technical assistance for any communities that see this bipartisan infrastructure law as a way to really revitalize or to meet your community goals, but maybe don't fully understand the opportunities available within the law, or maybe would like some assistance with prioritizing activities and policies to help to meet your goals, and would appreciate some federal assistance there. As part of that, we are looking for communities that have partner organizations, nonprofits, advocacy organizations, those sorts of things that want to come together and form a sort of coalition and partner with the federal government for those opportunities that this law can provide to assist your community. So letters of interest for that program are due December 6th. There's a form and template on our website, and I'll make sure that the staff has the link for that. And then just locally here, wanted to mention that within the next 6 weeks or so, the FHWA Tennessee Division will be bringing on 2 new transportation planners. We'll bring those by this body and introduce you guys to them as they're coming on board. But we'll have some new members of our team here to support and assist any way that we can. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to our TDOT report. I think Jonathan Russell.
Stacy, I'll do it.
Okay, you got it?
Stacy Morrison.
All right,
Sir.
take off.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to point out, so in long-range planning, one of the things that I lead along with Jonathan Russell there is our planning grant program, and you all had 4 of those that you received last year. Those are just now getting underway, and those will run from about 8 to 12 months, so they'll be finishing up about this time next year. And hopefully I can get proposal approved for another round of planning grants. We're working on that now, so hopefully we'll be able to get that underway next spring for another round. They've been very successful. We just did 30 across the state in this last round, and so total we've done about 100 planning grants across the state over a 4-year period. So it's been I get emails constantly all the time like, are y'all going to do that next year? It's from all across the state. So we hope to be able to continue that funding for that program as well. The other item I wanted to mention that's pulled up here is our annual project ranking. We'd like to get these in by the end of the year, and talking with staff, just a lot going on right now, and so we'll continue to work with them and you all to get your feedback. There are some changes in our process this year that we wanted to identify. We've created this hub. You'll see at the top it's called RPO Project Rankings, just on the web address. But originally we developed this for the RPOs. They were kind of our test case for a couple of years, and I was able to get our data viz folks to add the MPOs to this project hub this year, and just a way to get this information out. So some of the changes. Again, you'll go to the site, you click on the MPO hub, and then you'll be able to go to Nashville and click on Learn More, and you can see the listing of your projects. The biggest change from leadership on this is you will see, if you'll scroll down a little bit there, Daniel, and it'll load here in a second. You can click that toggle there to committed right there. If you click on the committed list, you go down below, you'll see the map of the projects. You can click on the projects and get some general information about that project. And there's a little spreadsheet underneath the maps here as well, which identifies, I think for Nashville, there was 14 in the committed list, I believe. So what does that mean? So the committed list means that we're committed to get these projects to a construction letting within the next 5 to 7 years. That's the goal on these. So you no longer have to rank these projects, okay? The next toggle up there, if you'll toggle that one off and then toggle proposed on, the proposed list is where we request feedback from our MPOs and our RPOs. And so you'll see that list of projects, obviously a lot more extensive. It says proposed, but I do want to point out that we are committed to doing all of these projects. Those in that committed list are the projects that have already been approved in the 3-year highway program by the legislature, and so they're already in that stream to get underway. And again, we're committed to do those projects. So where we'd like to get your feedback from, again, we'll continue to work with staff on getting that information back from you all, is this proposed list. And Sean and I have already talked about a few ideas from staff as well, and so we'll figure out the best way to do that, whether we're able to do it between now and the end of the year through a meeting or a virtual meeting, or it may, again, a slight risk like I identified earlier in January as well. But we will work with you all to get your feedback back to us on the proposed list for ranking of those. So,
Mr. Chair, I've got a question for Stacy. So in the last several years, I know part of our feedback to the state is that the exercise to rank projects that you're already planning to do, I suppose it's important to help you with scheduling, although there are many more factors involved in how you schedule projects than how we might rank projects that you've already decided to do. But I think what we're looking for is opportunities to collaborate with the department on that next round of projects that you might ultimately commit to. And those aren't on these lists. So, I mean, you heard it earlier today, a desire for our mayors to be a lot more collaborative with the state when it comes to the projects that you're going to decide to do. And so any immediate thoughts about how we go about going further upstream to decide what the new starts projects are going to be in our region so that we're not relegated to helping you schedule projects that are going to be scheduled based on factors that are a little bit more practical than politics?
Right. Good question, Michael. So now can I go to examples though? So with our RPOs, they have individual requests, and then there's all those individual requests too within the MPO, whether that, mayors send a letter to leadership or to the governor or wherever. We want to be able to compile all those, but obviously the MPO has a very extensive planning process, and typically that's those projects that are sitting out there in that illustrative list, that's kind of your wish list. Those projects have not been committed to any type of funding like you see here with the committed and proposed list. So we would also like to get those, we consider new starts. Obviously, I think it would be probably best practice for the MPO staff to put together, have that discussion. I know you've got the other committee as well to discuss, here's the ones that we've planned for, out in the future, but what are those priorities to get? So you want to see those next in that proposed list to kind of move through that pipeline. And so that's, in the MPO's case, that's what we are suggesting, but we're open to any additional suggestions as well.
Well, I'd say that information has been provided at TDOT. We adopted the Regional Transportation Plan back a couple of years ago, which includes a fiscally constrained list of projects through the year 2045, some of which you've committed to do, some of which you haven't, plus an additional series of projects that we don't know how would be funded over the next 25 years. I think what we're looking for is a conversation about those priorities that are already prioritized and ranked in the documents that have been adopted by this board. I think what we're looking for is conversation around those things that we've already identified that you have not yet committed to, and a better understanding of, despite something being a priority, what is the criteria that you're going to use to determine whether or not you get behind it or not. So I don't think it's about project identification and illustrative lists. I think those exist. It's about sitting down across the table from each other and talking about, of the universe that has been identified, how we're going to move forward on what needs to get done.
Right, and I think you'll agree it's not as easy as sending 1 through 10, and we're going to do number 1 first. There's all those other different caveats that come into play there, and obviously we've tried to use different criteria over the years with typically, your safety and your economic development things that kind of heighten particular projects to that list to get them into the funding stream. And so, again, we're always welcome to that type of conversation so we can better clarify that list of criteria.
Yeah. Well, for example, and I'll throw a bone to Mayor Moore, we have in our regional transportation plan through the year 2045, no less than about $500 million of fiscally constrained funds allocated to the South Corridor improvements, hopefully to get that to be a multimodal corridor with technology and rapid transit, but no real response from the department about whether or not that's something that y'all would be agreeable to helping us pursue as a region. But that's in the plan right now, both in terms of the fiscally constrained plan where we're allocating your NHPP funds from federal appropriations anticipated in the future to that priority. The priority has already been identified. And so your guidance on how we can sit down with leadership to talk about the practical nature of beginning to move forward on some of those things is what we're looking forward to hearing.
A good conversation, and I agree. Us as planners, it's there. Take it and run with it. But as we well know, we need to continue to push that to the different levels that it needs to go to. So good conversation, Michael. If there's any other questions?
I'll just add that I appreciate TDOT getting this information on the hub where everybody can view it. I think it's much improved from the list that we've received in previous years. I guess just to give a kind of a scale to what Stacy talked about, the proposed list of projects, we just calculated quickly the amount of proposed projects is about $2.2 billion worth of projects, and I think 40-something projects. And in previous years, I think we've deferred to, as Michael mentioned, the phase of work, so those that were ready for construction being kind of a higher priority on our ranking list, and then moving down from there. Of that $2.2 billion, there's about $500 million that's ready for construction. That's the remaining phase of work that's left, and then there's about $800 million that's not yet ready for construction, and about another $800 million that's probably not yet started yet in the project development process. So just kind of a framing of how these different projects kind of break up into the tiers for your consideration. As we, I think that's some feedback we can continue to kind of work off of the, a methodology of those projects that are ready to go being the top priority, but working further down the list, I think we're interested in the feedback or comments that you have of projects that might not be on this list that you want considered. So feel free to review this list and then circulate any feedback that you have to staff.
Yeah, so this is on the World Wide Web, so it's there and available. So if you haven't seen it yet, I think we presented to the technical committee, but obviously a lot of you all didn't get that make that connection maybe, but it's there.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you, Steve. All right, we'll move to the chair's report, and I think I'm going to turn this over to Sean. He's got a few things he wants to, what the task force, what the next date for them, and
I'll let you do the nominating.
Okay, I knew he was coming up with that. Do you want me to reappoint the nominating committee and get a motion, or just tell them who they are?
You can just tell them who they are.
Yeah, okay. Nominating committee is going to be
power to this chair.
You see Paige and Mayor Hutto and Mayor Reed. They're going to be looking at the next chair for, I guess, in February. Is that right?
We'll schedule elections for next meeting in January.
Okay, January. It'll be for new chair and co-chair. And I imagine there's a lot of mayors in here that's got a target on your back right now. So if you don't want a target, you might not get on that nominating committee. I think that's the route to go. But I don't have to have a motion. All right. Okay.
And then for the staff report, I just want to give an update. It's been kind of a hiatus with the Project Delivery Task Force, but we're looking to meet again in December. We'll be meeting on Thursday, December 8th, back at the Smyrna Event Center. And what we're looking to do, two topics to focus on. One is receiving a presentation from TDOT on their Project Delivery Network, or PDN. And that's one of the initiatives as part of their Project Delivery, Accelerating Project Delivery and initiative is specifically focused on some of the state-led projects that, as Stacy mentioned, those committed projects that they're trying to implement in the next 5 to 7 years, and really work through kind of a more efficient way of delivering those and getting them through the pipeline. We've also identified, a number of challenges across these different areas of the process, from communication to data to process improvements, and so we've had some side discussions outside of the task force with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, and so we'll be kind of bringing those potential actions for review and discussion by the task force on some of those things that we can be doing in the short, medium, and long term that involve not only the local governments, TDOT, but also MPO staff in order to kind of move some of those actions forward. And so look forward to kind of discussing that can help us address some of these challenges. And even though we are developing the TIP, I think the task force's role is not over, as the obligations, we still need to get that number higher, and so the work continues to make sure that we're obligating the funds that come to our region. And then just a preview of the January meeting, 2 action items. One, our safety performance measure targets. So we'll be focusing on some of the trends related to serious injuries and fatalities within our region. And at our next meeting, in addition to the election of TPB officers, we will also add the RTP amendment and TIP amendment back that we deferred. And then just for our informational items, we'll be coming back to our NPO member orientation. You may recall that we did this last January, and I know we have a few new faces based on the recent election results, and so hopefully we can give you kind of the NPO primer and background to set us up for success throughout the calendar year. Last thing, I'll turn over to Anna just to mention kind of the upcoming TIP development cycle.
Thanks, Sean. Just looking towards the next calendar year, we just wanted to let everyone know that we're going to continue the trend of accepting proposed amendments to the Transportation Improvement Program more than quarterly. That seemed to work out really well this year. So we'll be looking to adopt TIP amendments again in February. We'll want to have you submitting those proposals to us by mid-January. And then we'll have 4 more cycles following that on roughly the same schedule as we did this past year. We will send out a full calendar with all associated dates related to TIP amendments in our recap email after this meeting.
And I think we're just going to pass it over to Steve just to mention some good news on the North Nashville Transit Center.
There it is. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's support for the project over the years. This project we broke ground on last week. We're pleased to have Mayor Cooper and a number of other folks out. It's going to be the second of our transit centers, and if you all remember back to when we adopted the long-range transit strategic plan, there's plans over time to develop quite a few throughout the region. It's at the intersection of Clarksville Pike and 26th Avenue North, which in Nashville is one of the highest concentrations of transit ridership, zero auto ownership, and lower income folks. So it really is a significant hub. $17 million project with not atypical for projects like this, about a dozen different funding sources. Some competitive, it's about 55% federally funded, about 32% state, and about 18% local. So, and significant funding through GNRC and the CRISA program, because in addition to its transit functions, it has broader mobility options. There'll be about 9 bus bays. We'll have 7 routes that connect there. We'll be doing the first level platform boarding stations in Middle Tennessee, which will hopefully be a laboratory for future bus rapid transit applications. But there was also pickup drop-off areas for rideshare operators and taxis, bicycle storage, bike share facilities, scooter corrals. Felix, Diana, what other mobility hub options am I missing? Yes, ma'am. Ticket vending machines, real-time information, and also will be designed to tie into a broader development site that is targeted for redevelopment over the next couple of years. So we're looking forward to working on more of these. It broke ground last week. They're grading the site as we speak, and you all will be invited to a grand opening in April 2024. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, as we wrap up here, just wanted you to make note of our December meeting will be the meeting of our regional council body. As you recall, this year we went to an alternating meeting schedule. So our Transportation Policy Board meets 1 month, and then we broaden the topics out to talk about things more holistically in alternating months. So the regional council body, all of y'all are a voting member of, for the most part. Encourage you to be here December 14th. The topics that day will be on open space conservation, ways we can work together to identify priorities for conservation, but also tools and practices that we can deploy to make sure that we're not losing the character of our region as we continue to face rapid growth and development pressures. We'll also be doing a deep dive into a topic that Mayor Anderson has brought up a few times at these meetings with regard to how we could better align our transportation priorities with the expansion of broadband across the region. So we're been having conversations with peer states about where the intersection is between transportation projects and IT investments in the infrastructure aligned with our economic development objectives regarding broadband. And we'll also be looking to install our new board of directors for the regional council for the 2023 year. So that's a look ahead to December 14th. That is the second Wednesday of the month, not the third Wednesday of the month. Look forward to seeing you there.
Okay. Anybody have any other business bring for the board? If not, I'd just like to say if I don't see any of y'all at the December meeting, I wish everybody a happy holidays. We're all blessed, and try to remember those that's less fortunate and help them through the holidays. And have a safe holiday too, especially where people are ripping and running right now. Let's all slow down and enjoy the holidays. At that, I want to also thank the GNRC staff for the work that they do. They do a lot of hard work representing us. We don't want to take them for granted. And I know they bailed this mayor out on several occasions, and they've been a big help for me. And I didn't know the scope of their activities, but I have found out. And let me tell you something, this is not in the script either. This is coming from me. So with that, I'll take a motion, Mayor Moore.
Yes, sir. I move we dismiss immediately.
So moved. Leave your name tags on the table. I forgot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for deconstructing this, though.
Did I get everything that was?
Oh, yeah. No, these are the only two things I had up here that were. We didn't use that today, so I think everything that was in the meeting back to begin with should still be there.